We are very happy to welcome you here in the premises of the Institute of International Relations of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv for the occasion of today's conference, Problems and Prospects of EU-Ukraine Cooperation, which is held today jointly by the Institute of International Relations and by the Fund Civil Diplomacy. We are very happy that our distinguished guests and colleagues and friends came today to attend this conference. In particular, we are very happy that today with us is His Excellency Mr. Luc Jacobs, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Belgium to Ukraine. That today with us we also have Mr. Yonet Tezel, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Turkey to Ukraine. We are very happy to have here today with us Ms. Kolar Bernadette, Embassy of Hungary in Ukraine, Ms. Louise Morsing, Embassy of Sweden to Ukraine, Ms. Emilia Yasiuk, representative of the Embassy of Republic of Poland to Ukraine, Mr. Michel Versailles, the Embassy of Kingdom of Belgium to Ukraine, Ms. Lita Surmava from the Embassy of Georgia to Ukraine. We are also very happy to have here with us Ms. Katerina Chubey, the Young European Ambassador's representative, Mr. Igor Girla from Diplomatic Party of Moldova, Mr. Gural Emirhan, Vice Director of the European Union Institute in Marmara University from Turkey, Mr. Serhiy Korsunsky, the representative of the Diplomatic Academy of Ukraine, Mr. Serhiy Kucheruk from the National Council of Television and Radio Broadcasting of Ukraine, Mr. Mykola Movchan from the Ministry of Youth and Sports of Ukraine, Mr. Andriy Najos from the EU Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Mr. Anton Naichuk, the representative of the Fund Civil Diplomacy, and many, many other distinguished guests. We are very happy to have you all here today with us on the occasion of our conference. And to start our conference, our event, let me give the floor for the welcoming words to the Vice Rector of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv, Mr. Petrov.
Your Excellencies, professors, faculty members, students, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a very great pleasure for me to convey greetings from the Red Building headquarters, and especially from our rector, Professor Leonid Hubersky, to the participants to the conference on very burning issues of the European life. I am not going to take much of your time because you have a lot of speakers here today, and as an expert, you will discuss these very burning and topical issues of the European Union-Ukrainian cooperation. So I would like to wish you fruitful work and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Rector. For the welcoming introductory words, we welcome here Mr. Igor Goluby, Deputy Director of the Institute of International Relations of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv.
Your Excellencies, dear honorable guests, colleagues and students, on behalf of the Institute of International Relations, I would like to express my gratitude for gathering today and participation in the international conference devoted to the 20th anniversary of the first EU-Ukrainian Summit, Problems and Prospects of Ukraine-EU Cooperation. We are living in the epoch of turbulent, inevitable changes of international relations, where the European Union plays one of the leading roles. Currently, European integration becomes an integral part of transformation and modernization processes in Ukraine, as well as in all East European political dimension. Ukrainian nation has made its decision towards European values. This strategic choice marked the commencement of a brand new stage of political and economic development of our country. Taking into account a long-lasting, sometimes complicated, but so important Ukrainian-EU relations, we are holding this conference in order to understand the mistakes of the past, elaborate the frames of our cooperation for the present, and build an effective platform for the future. Thank you for the attention.
The next floor for the opening introductory remarks goes to Mr. Anton Naichuk, Director of the Fund Civil Diplomacy.
Thank you very much. At first, I would like to say that it's a great pleasure for me and a great pleasure for our Civil Diplomacy Foundation to become a part of such a great event. I really appreciate participation of ambassadors, top-ranked Ukrainian and international politicians, experts, and our colleagues. Also, words of gratitude for our organizational committee. Development of international relations in the regional frames and a constructive dialogue with the European Union is a privileged case of Ukrainian external policy. By standing on the road to European integration, our society made a very important choice that demands highest possible efforts, permanent progress, patience and confidence. I'm sure that all questions that will be discussed during our conference have a relevant meaning and will help us to generate new approaches and effective practical recommendations how to develop our further cooperation between our states. Several words about our foundation. Our motto is a dialogue without borders, so our team is deeply concerned that civil diplomacy is the best way to unite people, regulate conflicts, and produce social partnership. So it's an honor for Civil Diplomacy Fund to take part in the organization of this conference here in the Institute of International Relations. So I invite everybody to a constructive dialogue, to constructive discussion, and productive cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Naichuk. We are very pleased to welcome here His Excellency Mr. Yone Tezel, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Turkey to Ukraine, and your introductory words.
Thank you very much. May I just ask the Chair about the procedure in the sense that I have some notes that are of a nature of a more substantive talk. Shall I do it now? Shall I leave it to a later stage? All right. Okay, then, of course, I will, as usual, start with by thanking our organizers. It's always a pleasure to be in this Institute of Learning and to be with young people. And thank you for inviting a representative of Turkey to a EU-Ukraine debate, to which Turkey can maybe contribute from a certain perspective. I thought there would be need for translation, so to make it easier for translators, I took some notes, but I see that there is no need. But I still have a text, so maybe I'll try to keep to it so that I don't lose my thoughts. I'll only speak about, don't worry, about maybe 12, 13 minutes. I'll just share, I think, my thoughts as representing a country which is a friend and a strategic partner of Turkey, but a country which also has a long history, relatively long history with the EU. And the way I can contribute is by sharing with you my observations over the years and some more recent observations in our relationship with the EU, and leave it to you as Ukrainians to draw your conclusions. So this is what a few points, 6, 7 points I wrote down in hindsight after so many years of our relations with EU, which is still, more recently not at its best. But leaving that side, a general point about Europe overall, so that you understand how we look at it as your southern neighbor. A general point about Europe is clear. Europe is a cultural and even a civilizational entity, a collectivity that has produced many, many invaluable things to humanity. In culture, in art, in good governance, scientific progress. It's certainly the case. But admittedly, in history, sometimes Europe also has caused a lot of suffering and inequality within itself and towards non-European nations across the world. The good thing is Europe is aware of this, and Europe has the capacity to correct itself, to rectify itself, redesign itself, as it did after World War II, for example, which produced the EU, which we are now talking about. But overall, the EU is the success story of Europe, and we hope it will continue to be a success story. So now some points about what we can say on the basis of what we have had with Europe, what we continue with the EU. I mean, EU and Europe are not, of course, the same thing. What we are experiencing with the EU, European Community, formerly. The bid for EU membership for us and for you, of course, should be principle-based but also interest-based for both sides. Like Ukraine, we made a strategic choice rather earlier than you to move towards the EU, and this was a decision not just about geopolitics. It was certainly not about only commercial gains, commercial calculations. It was something deeper. Put in very simple terms, we wanted to give our people the highest standards that were available politically, economically, and socially. And these standards we saw to be in the EU sphere. That's why we wanted to move towards the EU. Also because historically, we have been, for a few centuries at least, we've been part of balance of power calculations in Europe, so that made sense. And the aspirations of our people also directed us towards that. And our multicultural identity has a European component. It's not only European, but we had a European component which formed over the centuries that also made sense for us to move towards the EU. I think these also hold true for Ukraine. I guess that would be quite similar in the Ukrainian case. Another point is that this membership process, the accession process, is usually designed to be mutually rewarding, that both sides gain from it. Although this has not been always obvious to people on both sides, but to the layman maybe, but that's the case really. Given European historical practices, what we know of Europe, I must also say that the EU would never have entered into a relationship with Turkey, including the possibility of the goal of membership, had it not seen some serious gain for itself. So they were expecting certain gains, they are expecting, as we are also expecting. In fact, Turkey began to benefit from this long ago, thanks to our accession process. Because the accession process has this self-disciplining dynamic that it brings to the polity and to society, we've been able to upgrade our capacity for good governance, for further democratization in Turkey, let alone economic development. So these are the gains, even on the road, in the process. The process itself has been important, which I guess should hold true for Ukraine as well. The other obvious point I'd like to make, obvious because you are feeling it very much too, reforms required, asked by EU are not always easy, but they are unavoidable. Harmonization and reforms in general, however, ought to be internalized, not as some foreign alien conditionality for the candidate country, I mean society, but as something reflecting the collective aspiration of the population. In the EU, one is talking about both the member states and the Commission, let us call it, the bureaucracy. And in a good scenario, the communication between the candidate and the EU and the members, when it's usually constructive, and in that case, the candidate becomes more responsive and recognizes its shortcomings, and the criticism from the other side becomes more constructive and helpful. This has been the case for quite a long time, especially during the previous decade, for example. We were not happy with some of the criticism. Criticism is not always easy, but looking at things, it has not always been the biggest problem. Criticism between Europe, the EU, and the candidate is part of the story. This is, one has to get used to it and deal with it professionally, realistically. The thing is, we were able to, as Ukraine is, we have recognized our shortcomings, accepted that we had a certain homework, and we tried to move towards it. That's when the process moved the best. The Commission, they're not always maybe the easy interlocutor, but they're professional, and they really help and encourage the candidate. So they don't take the political decisions, but a realistic facilitator, I think Ukraine is probably aware from its own experience about this, but you cannot control member states, and sometimes you have problems there. And the reforms I mentioned, we in Turkey too, especially during the adoption of the customs union, going back to 1995, as early as 95, the industry, the business, or on some other issues, the civil society, social groups were against it, but we remained on the course because we thought that was the right strategic decision, and it always had majority support, so it was legitimate. So far, I've mentioned these relatively positive things about the membership, but not all our experience is positive, as you know. So let me just, some points of caution maybe, which we hope isn't replicated in the Ukrainian case, but speaking frankly between us, first, we must not idealize the EU. Unfortunately, even in EU, even in Europe, you have double standards and unfair treatment. It is possible, it happens. And Turkey, we've had a fair share of that. We were on the receiving end of that. In Turkey, we don't really have the classical sense of Euroscepticism that, for example, one still finds in Britain, in the UK, in the sense that we're not against the essence of the project of the EU, so that is, but rather Turkish people's dissatisfaction, criticism towards the EU has been because of perceived double standards, moving all of the goalpost in the middle of the game, so to say, and not being treated fairly the same as some other candidates. That's been making over the years a certain decreasing the support for EU, and which is a fact. By the way, as the negotiations continue, more sectors within society might develop certain negative attitudes towards the EU. That's also part of the accession process. You'll just have to manage that, because when reforms show that certain people have to make concessions, there's this resistance from certain sectors. of course, to this, I have to add the fact that here the individual member states come onto the scene. They might have individual problems with you, and those individual issues affects the decision making in Brussels. So if they have an issue with one country, two countries can block things, can veto things, and other countries might hide against those other countries. Even if those countries are small, they're able to veto, and certain political groups might use that. So it's a tricky process. That's why I said in the beginning, with all the respect, we should not idealize things in EU as if they are the perfect polity par excellence. And more recently, as we all know, realistically, EU has not been at its best for the last 10, 15 years. And I'm not just talking about the financial crisis, that's clear, that's only part of it. But social, political problems faced by individual members and the Union, I think, have rather changed the EU. And I think Europeans and candidate countries are aware of this, hopefully. Since the end, the process started since the end of the Cold War, really, with the deepening of insecurity in the European geography, failure to solve together as a group some economic, social challenges, problems, the very famous cliche word now, democratic deficit. These all have been weakening the political center in Europe. So in many European countries, the political center has been rather shifting, and in many cases, rather towards the right, and in some cases, the far right, the extreme right. So I have to mention, those words that to see the picture, that's why you have papers, commentaries, and academic work calling attention to xenophobia, increasing racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, failure to uphold those values which Europe itself advocates. So that's has been the part of the problem, and this is detracted from Europe's image. And these, of course, are not specific to Europe. These are happening in so many countries. Populism, nationalist populism. On top of it, put the post-truth era. So we all are going through a difficult period, but my point is, Europe has changed in the last 10, 15 years. For our European colleagues here from EU members, for example, one could ask, are they more proud of the EU today, or would they be more proud of the EU of the 10, 15 years ago? I think that could be a question to think about. On top of this, put the reality. One commentator in terms of world economy, for example, one calculation said that the world's economic power is shifting eastwards every year by about 140 kilometers. So that's another thing EU has to think about and adapt itself to. Overall, I think EU's soft power has somewhat been weakened in this period, unfortunately. Its moral authority also has suffered somewhat from this. Having said all these, though, my message is not negative, and what I mean is that despite all these, it still makes sense to work towards integration with the EU. As I said, Europe has this capacity to, correct its mistakes and, rectify itself, so to say. And the European standards are still good. European principles, well, they are universal principles and values mostly. They are still good despite the problems of European performance itself. And, the EU of today is not the EU when we became very serious about membership some maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago. This is not the EU we set ourselves to be a member of, but we are hoping this is transitory, and we're not going through a Turkey-EU a good process, and both sides have responsibilities in this respect. Today's conference is not about the challenges and problems of Turkey, so it's a, I'm not going to talk about this. If there are questions, I shall. It's a breath of fresh air. Sometimes we should also, be able to criticize the other side, and that is what maybe this conference is about, in a sense, so that Ukraine takes makes certain conclusions itself. The goal of membership from the beginning was positive, and I said it still remains the correct decision even now. From the point of view of EU, it also makes sense to have countries like Ukraine and Turkey in, provided they fulfill the conditions. There's no doubt about that. There is no shortcut. There shouldn't be shortcut. One should fulfill the conditions, do the homework. It makes sense then for Europe to have Turkey and Ukraine in along the way in due course, if it's possible. If Europe wants to be a more effective international actor, a more relevant international actor. If Europe is content with being a relatively prosperous, delimited space within Europe, they don't really need Ukraine or Turkey. But if in this new world, in the new order that is being forged out, I think if the choice is to be an actor, then it makes sense to have Turkey, EU in. Another point, I'm wrapping up. You have to be, you've probably already understood, you'll have to be ready for disappointments and setbacks in this process. Full equality is not always possible, although that might change. This very unequal position between the EU and the candidate, that paradigm, in the future, maybe it might not work that way. That might have to change. We will see, especially in our in Turkey's relations with the EU, as the world is changing, perhaps the accession process has to change and adapt to certain things. In the case of Ukraine, of course, the membership is not immediately on the agenda. I guess people in this room know about that. But that's no reason to stop things and to be frustrated. Still, the process is important, and it's worth moving on that front. Now, one final point, even more abstract than what I've said so far, and it is that we understand and support as Turkey Ukraine's EU bid. How could we not? We have gone through the same process. We're trying to continue it. This European choice, understandable focus on the EU, on the part of you Ukrainians, should not lead to what I sometimes call among friends Euro-myopia, European myopia. The focus is understandable, but when you turn it into identity-related discourses, what comes out is the following in some of the public sphere in Ukraine. The West is good, the West is Europe, the East is bad, the East is, well, that Asia or Russia, whatever. This binary opposition way of looking at it, one understands why it is like that, but is not, I think, very helpful politically and culturally and philosophically, in the sense that Ukraine's value to Europe is not the possibility that it will become just any ordinary European country, EU country. Ukraine's value for Europe is that it can bring something added. And that addedness, that added value, is that Ukraine's multicultural background, its Eurasian background, the stronger you are in your relations with other parts of the world, the stronger you will be with the EU. So that's, I think, one point I'd like to make. And maybe I should stop here, and I'd be ready to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. For a very interesting and deep analysis, expertise, and remarks, which of course are very relevant for Ukraine's today and Ukraine's future. I think that questions, we will give the floor for questions in the end of our introductory panel. And now let me give this floor to Mr. Andriy Najos from Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Thank you so much for the floor and for the opportunity to submit some messages. I think I will reserve the right for myself to have the in-depth analysis. Yes, I would like to save the rights for myself to provide the in-depth analysis on the panel discussion. But thank you for the opportunity, and I heard a lot of very interesting messages from the country, our neighboring country, Turkey, who signed the association agreement more than 40 years ago. And this country has a brilliant experience how to deal with the Brussels and with the European institutions. But at the same time, so we have to admit that Ukraine has chosen its own path, European path, and European integration as a key element in our foreign policy, because we don't have actually any other options, because we used to belong to the East, I mean the former Soviet Union, so we spent on that part of the Europe more than 300 years, but at the same time we always share the common European values, and so especially under those circumstances we have to accept that, of course, we have some advantages and disadvantages, but our future is with the European Union, because we have to make the complete renovation in our Ukrainian house, and all the standards and values are properly accepted by Ukraine, and so we are ready for internal reforms, and it's the topic for our in-depth discussions on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Najos, for this interesting introduction, which of course will be then preceded by your main address. Now please let me give a floor to Mr. Mykola Movchan, Deputy Minister for Youth and Sports of Ukraine, on the issues of European integration.
Absolutely. Good morning to everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm very happy to see here so many young people and my colleague and partners from our institutions, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, colleague ambassadors, and other ministries and other embassies. First of all, I would like to wish you that you are future ambassadors, politicians, diplomats, international journalists, international businessmen, state people, and you are responsible, and you will be responsible for our cooperation with the countries of the European Union, and with the European Union and other international organizations, and with the whole world. That's why I'm very happy that your great presence here, so many people are here, and it means that you share our values and priorities. And you know that the priority of the foreign policy of Ukraine and domestic policy of Ukraine is European integration and our future membership in the European Union. we believe in it and we work for this. You know that currently we have the reforms of the ministries, and our ministries will be rebuilt following the sample of the ministries in the European Union member countries. And for us it's very important, because what does it mean European integration? From one side it means that we implement the association agreement between Ukraine and the European Union. From the other side, it means cultural integration, multiculturalism. You know, it's one of the like pillars of the European Union. We learning foreign languages actually, because 24 official languages in the European Union, and I know that in your institute you learn lots of languages, and it's also very important. And I encourage you to learn languages of the European Union, because we in the Ministry of Youth and Sports, we actively promote like youth exchanges. We have different councils of youth exchanges with the European Union member countries, like Lithuania, for example, Poland. We work with other countries of the European Union, like Croatia, other Baltic states, to conclude the agreements on youth exchanges, because youth, it's engine of many processes, and also it's engine of the European integration. That's why I encourage you to participate actively in cooperation of our ministry. I know that many of you are leaders of the different NGOs, different associations, and I see here Mrs. Katarina Chubey, and she is the ambassador, European integration ambassador, if not mistaken, but youth ambassador. And we in the ministry, we actively promote such format of cooperation, like youth ambassadors. For example, we have now youth ambassadors for United Nations, and at the end of this year we'll get 2 people will participate in work, and will represent Ukrainian youth in the representative representation of Ukraine in the United Nations during one month. The same thing we have youth ambassador in UNESCO, and we work. That's why I actively encourage you to be always young and participate in activities of our ministry. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Muchan, for your encouraging words for our youth, for our students. I'm sure that they heard what you said to them. Now let me give the floor with great pleasure to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Kingdom of Belgium to Ukraine, Mr. Luc Jacobs.
Thank you, dear hosts, dear participants, dear students. I did not prepare a statement, but just some spontaneous words of welcome and introductory remarks. It is an absolute honor for me and for my colleague, newly arrived in Kiev, for Michel Versailles, to be here with you. The Institute for Foreign Relations is a powerhouse of scientific research, but also practice-oriented research on international relations, which is our daily sort of environment in which diplomats live. At the same time, when the European Union is the issue of discussion and debate, Belgium cannot be absent. That is why we are overrepresented in this room. This tiny, small, in a geographic sense, country, Belgium, but being the host country to the European institutions and being one of the founding fathers, one of the 6 founding fathers of the European Union. I believe in the exchange between practitioners, I mean diplomats, politicians, business people, and academia, the academic world. We are complementary. We can learn a lot from each other. We do not have the time for doing fundamental research on what we are doing, in what context we are working, and you do not have the time to combine, let's say, your research and your teaching with the daily practitioners' lives. So we are absolutely complementary, and as I said, we can learn a lot of each other. As I said, I did not prepare a statement. I will actively participate in debates. I'm ready to answer questions, but at the same time, a question was already asked to me by my Turkish colleague about whether current member states of the European Union would feel as proud of the EU today as they would have done 10 or 15 years ago, and my simple and clear answer is yes, we do feel as proud about the European Union as we felt ever since the very beginning of starting this project. And indeed, the European Union is not an international organization as any other organization. It is a project, it is a political project, it is a societal project, it is an economic project, it is a cultural project, but above all it is a project, and a project has a dynamic connotation in it. The European Union is not a static organization. The European Union is constantly asked to adapt to new challenges, to new situations, and can we pretend that we do not succeed in overcoming these challenges? It takes time. There are no miraculous solutions to that. But let's take the financial crisis, the banking crisis, the public debt crisis was not homegrown in the European Union. It came to us from the United States. Okay, our banks were too much exposed to the situation there and to the real estate bubble and debt bubble there. But at the same time, what did we do? According to European standards, in a record period of time, I mean in 2 years and a half, we managed to get a banking union in the European Union. That means that we got our act together, that banks are much more safer, much more healthier than they were. We have a joint we have a common policy in tackling these issues, and you see only by this example that the European Union is facing challenges, is responding to challenges, and is devising solutions to challenges. And we have to do this with more member states now than in the beginning, which is a challenge in itself. But we are not a project neither that we have one identical opinion from the outset. But what is the beautiful thing about the European Union? It is that every member state, every member of the Union has its own voice in this project, and we come to a consensus, we come to compromises, and we come to policies that are able to tackle the challenges. So, in short, I feel as proud, maybe even more prouder than before, about what the European Union has to do now. And indeed, there is another challenge, and my Turkish colleague has referred to that as well. The European Union, in terms of its population, in terms of its economic power, in terms of its soft power, is not the only power center, of course, in the world. We, as European Union, we have to adapt to new geopolitical situations. We have to adapt to new geoeconomic situations, and also there, the analysis is a very lucid one, and the European Union is also tackling that challenge. So if you consider us not to be a static organization, a club, at least a bloc, the Anglo-Saxon media always speak about the bloc. The European Union is not a bloc. Again, it is not a club. It's not a golf club of which everybody wants to be a member and then lay back in the sofa and do nothing. It is about a project, and it is constantly made. So that is the message I would like to bring to this conference by way of introduction. It is a project, it is a moving project, it's a project on the move. And what has the European achieved, which is, I think, very important for a Ukrainian audience? It is already 70 years of peace on our part of the European continent. And you know that as Ukraine, Belgium has been the battlefield of the big powers during the past centuries. So you can imagine how important, what importance we attach to the success of the European Union as a project that brings peace, security, and prosperity to its citizens. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your valuable remarks regarding the nature of the European Union and its value for European Union citizens and countries. Thank you very much again. Let me give the floor to Mr. Serhiy Kucheruk from the National Council of Television and Radio Broadcasting of Ukraine.
Thank you. I thank the organization of the conference, and I hope we will discuss issue less and more prospects for our success story, our future in European Union. I hope our way maybe not so long way like Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kucheruk. Dear colleagues, please let me give the floor for introductory remark to Ms. Emilia Jasik, the head of the section on the issues of science, culture, education cooperation from the Embassy of the Republic of Poland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Prorector. It's a great honor for me to represent Polish Embassy and Poland at this conference. We know that EU project, as has been emphasized by my predecessor, His Excellency, Mr. Luc Jacobs, this is a project in which there is a certain dynamic and necessity to participate for all members and for candidates as well. Poland, it has been 13 years. 13 years since Poland has been an EU member. I want to say with a great feeling of pride that Poland has made a considerable, huge progress in all spheres of its development. This progress has been economic. There has been progress in social development, and in certain openness to cooperation with other partners, not only in the EU, but also beyond the EU. We have benefited from this membership, and this membership is a great option for Ukraine, I believe, in the future. What does it mean? This membership is not just a prize that is there to be given for free. Look, we are members, become a member as well. This is a huge task. It's like enormous task in all spheres. One of the key elements of Polish way to the European Union have been reforms. Reforms, reforms, and once again reforms. Decentralization, fighting corruption. I have to say we have great countries on the European continent who are examples of fighting with corruption. This is Scandinavian and Nordic countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway. We are not that close to them, but much closer to them, believe me, than 25 years ago. And I am proud of that because owing to this, we have made as much progress as we could have made with our potential. I want to say that in the presence of Ukrainian officials who are here, of representatives of universities, Mr. Prorector, young people, young Ukrainian people who apply for different scholarships. The future of Ukraine lies in your hands, in the willingness to take responsibility and to take responsibility for action to make these reforms possible. Reforms means strong tax system. Tax system will provide huge money to the budget, and budget will be able to distribute, Ukrainian authorities will be able to distribute these means for development of education, administration, economy, and also to make Ukrainian officials earn a little bit more. I want to say that another way to say that the EU is a project, it's also a task. Maybe it will be a little bit, you will not believe, but John Paul II was once said such a sentence: freedom is not given. Freedom is a task. Once you have freedom, nobody will give you a guarantee that it will just be there forever. You must do all your best to keep this freedom and to share this freedom, to distribute values in which you believe, values which give opportunities for others to participate on equal basis. Because one of the tasks of the EU and diplomacy is to maintain peace and development for as long as it is possible. There are different periods in history of the European Union, of our continent, which we share not only with EU countries. There are periods of time, and now I believe that the time is difficult, much more difficult than 10 or 15 years ago. And there are new challenges. The solutions to these challenges have not been found, but the fact that EU has managed to maintain peace within its borders for 70 years, this is unprecedented achievement and an extreme value. And I wish that this value and this success of the European Union as a peaceful project was developed further and was able to welcome new partners to share the success story of the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Yasuk, for your very interesting and important remarks, in particular about the importance of peace. That is why diplomacy, international relations, international law exist, and for Ukraine now, peace is the highest value. And also for mentioning moral authority of John Paul II, of course, freedom is also the thing which goes very important for Ukraine nowadays. Thank you very much again. And now let me give the floor to Ms. Karina Rogula, who is a student of the Institute of International Relations, who is one of the organizers of this conference on the part of the students. Please.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to open an event of such a level and of such a great importance. For more than a year, our team has been looking for a way to engage the student community in the process of working out practical recommendations for modern Ukrainian foreign policy. And in my humble opinion, one of the best options for such an endeavor in scientific circles is a conference. As a result, we came up with the name, Problems and Prospects of the EU-Ukraine Cooperation. It encapsulates the meaning and understanding of civilizational and historical changes of our society during those past 3 years, lasting and sometimes complicated cooperation between Ukraine and the European Union, as a result formation of a single and inseparable areas of stability, security, prosperity and justice. We are happy that so many of you, representatives of diplomatic missions, government officials, distinguished experts, prominent NGOs, well-known media and students gathered today in order to provide such discussion on such an important topic. Without you, this event wouldn't be what we hoped it will be. A fruitful discussion with concrete results, practical recommendations. We are extremely grateful for the Institute of International Relations and also the Civil Diplomacy Foundation, the main force behind this gathering. We are full of enthusiasm and I truly hope that you are so excited as we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rogulia. And please let me give the floor for, I think, the final introductory remarks to Ms. Katerina Chubey from Young European Ambassadors, who will, I think, talk about the role of the youth in prospects of EU-Ukraine cooperation.
Thank you a lot. First of all, I would like to say thanks for the organizers who led me to introduce the project, also to be present among such honorable persons. Thank you a lot. Second of all, I would like to represent the project which called the Young European Ambassadors. It is official project from the EU Neighbor East. You know, it's official neighborhood policy of the EU, which is oriented on the 6 countries: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Moldova, Belarus, and Ukraine. From all of the country, we have young people who represent their country. As you understand, I represent Ukraine. Also, we have more people in our team, and now we expand our project. And if you are interested in the details of this project, which has as online activity as well outdoor activity, I welcome you to the first section where I will represent it all details. And I will show you photos from our last meeting in Brussels, where we have opportunity to represent all our activity during the year, because this project lasts for a year. And now we have the new selections for the new young ambassadors. All who are interested, young people from 18 till 25 years, welcome to apply. You have 2 more days to apply. And in Brussels, we had opportunity to visit all official institutions, European Parliament, councils of the EU, Commission, and also we have possibility to speak with Ms. Federica Mogherini, which was amazing experience. And I had a lot of emotions after that meeting. It is very pleasant and professional woman. So if you want to participate in the project and to have possibility to represent our activity in Brussels in the next summer, welcome to the Young European Ambassadors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chubey, for acquaintance with that interesting project for our youth, for our students. And this is not...
We are not there.
No, we are not. Yeah.
Why?
It's for students, unfortunately. This is not the end, because, you know, there is a proverb, last but not least, and I think that this is the case where this proverb can be used truly, because for the last introductory words, I want to give this word to Ms. Svetlana Andrushenko, Associate Professor of our Institute of International Relations, who made a lot of efforts and a lot of her time and her ideas to organize this conference. So, Ms. Andrushenko, please.
Thank you very much. Just dear guests, dear participants, we really greatly appreciate your interest, really high interest, and your participation in this conference, because we found it really very fruitful and effective in doing what we usually do in our everyday life, everybody in its profession, in its work. So we're really pleased to host this conference on the issues of EU-Ukraine cooperation. The title of this conference is really challenging, and it's the very important things that problems and prospects of EU-Ukraine cooperation is the hard everyday work. And this is very important, a number of important aspects that we just see. First of all, we are proud of our youth. really, because they are active, because they are insistent, because they're eager to change this life, everyday life, on European values. They are aware of these values, and they are ready to work hard. This is really great. Thank you very much, students, for being in youth, for being so active here. The other very important aspect that we want to highlight, our institute and Civil Diplomacy Foundation wanted to highlight by this conference, is that we are targeted to develop a kind of discussion platform for foreign policy agenda of Ukraine. And of course, because of European integration is a strategic course, the strategic path of Ukraine, we are aware that this is the work in different spheres. This is overwhelming multi-level work. That is why we just want to join different views and different aspiration of diplomatic circles, representative of foreign representatives here. Practitioners from different ministries and, of course, academic circles and researchers. That's why the conference is an attempt to join and to develop, most of all, practical recommendations for what we have to do and what we have to concentrate on. Thank you very much for everybody who is interested, and we hope for our fruitful and effective work on our sections that will just have to be a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Andrushenko, once again for all your efforts to organize this conference. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, if you have any questions, any ideas, any comments which you would like to talk about or to ask our distinguished panel, you may do this now. If you can also do it later on. We are pleased to invite all our distinguished guests to a coffee break room, to which our charming and handsome students will help you find the way. We also want to say to our students that you are very welcome at our sections, which will be held after the coffee breaks for the distinguished guests. The section number 1 will work in the open space. Our organizing team also will show you the way. Section number 2 will work here in this conference hall, and section number 3 will work in room 106. Also, our charming team will help you to find your way. If the representatives of mass media have any questions which they want to ask our distinguished guests, they may do this after this introductory panel is finished in the hall near this conference hall. To finish our introductory panel, let me say thank you to all our distinguished guests, to Mr. Ambassadors, to representatives of the executive bodies of the Ukrainian government, to the representatives of the foreign embassies and youth organizations. And let me wish all our 3 sections a fruitful work and fruitful discussion after the coffee break. Thank you very much for all your time and efforts.